History is not only written by the victors, it is written by the survivors.
Empires rise from unassuming origins, forged in obscurity long before they seize the throne.
In the deep time of the Mesozoic, the same laws applied. A dynasty of predators would rise to claim an entire supercontinent.
Their reign, defined by a brutal, bizarre, and utterly unique evolutionary design. Now, let us open the chronicle and chart the rise and fall of this great dinosaur dynasty.
Our story begins not with a roar, but with a whisper.
In the Middle Jurassic, some 170 million years ago, the supercontinent of Gondwana was a sprawling, unified landmass. Here, in the shadows of giants, the great Allosaurs and Ceratosaurs that held dominion. The ancestors of the Abelisaurid line were small, unassuming figures. They were theropods, certainly, but marginalized, opportunistic hunters skittering beneath the notice of the established apex predators. The fossil record of this era is sparse, a fragmented prologue to their epic.
But within these early, humble hunters, an evolutionary experiment was beginning. Here, we find the first hints of their dynastic toolkit. The skull was changing. It was becoming shorter, deeper, and reinforced with thickened, rugose bone. This was not the slicing, blade-like skull of an allosaur.
This was something different, something built for impact and brute force.
But the most profound and baffling change was happening to the forelimbs.
While other predatory lines maintained functional, grasping arms, the Abelisaurid ancestors began a radical reduction.
Their arms shrank, generation by generation, becoming vestigial, seemingly useless appendages.
This was not a weakness. It was a strategic sacrifice. By shedding the evolutionary cost of functional arms, they were reinvesting that biological budget elsewhere.
Into the engine of their success. The skull became a battering ram, and the hind limbs powerful pistons.
This unique anatomical signature, this bulldog-like blueprint, was the key.
It was the spark that would ignite an empire when, millions of years later, the world itself began to tear apart. The stage for their ascent was set by the slow, inexorable tearing of the world.
As the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, the supercontinent of Gondwana began its great fragmentation. Africa, India, Madagascar, and South America tore apart, forming vast island continents.
This tectonic unraveling was a catastrophe for the established order. The old dynasties of predators, like the Allosaurs, found their territories fractured and their reign broken.
They dwindled, and they died.
This fragmentation created a vacuum of power, an ecological throne left empty on each new southern continent.
It was for this moment the Abelisaurids had been forged.
From their obscure origins, they exploded onto the scene, seizing dominance in a spectacular evolutionary radiation.
Their specialized bulldog blueprint was uniquely suited to the new prey that dominated these isolated lands, the Titanosaurs.
These long-necked sauropods, many armored, required a different kind of predator.
The Abelisaurids were not pursuit hunter, they were brawlers, ambush specialists. On the island of Madagascar, Majungasaurus claimed the apex role. Its skull, even more thickened and ornamented than its ancestors, was a devastating weapon.
The fossil record here reveals a brutal truth about their reign.
Scarred Majungasaurus bones, bearing the tooth marks of their own kind, provide irrefutable evidence of cannibalism.
This was a dynasty forged in extreme, violent competition.
Across the ocean, on the drifting subcontinent of India, Rajasaurus, the king lizard, patrolled the river valleys.
Its reign demonstrates the dynasty's sheer geographical spread, an empire built on continental drift.
But it was in South America, their ultimate fortress, that the Abelisaurid design reached its zenith.
Its most terrifying and bizarre conclusion. Here, we find Carnotaurus, the meat-eating bull.
This creature was the epitome of the Abelisaurid form.
The skull was short, deep, and absurdly powerful, but now it sported two massive, demonic-looking horns over the eyes.
We can only speculate as to their function, perhaps for species recognition. Or, more likely, for brutal, head-shoving contests for dominance.
Its body was a paradox. The forelimbs had shrunk to the point of being comical.
Four-fingered vestiges with no wrist, utterly incapable of movement.
Yet, its hind limbs were masterpieces of compact power.
Fossilized skin impressions, a discovery of breathtaking rarity, reveal it was not feathered, but covered in a mosaic of non-overlapping scales and large, conical scutes, like a form of chainmail.
This was the dynasty's perfect weapon. A battering ram powered by a locomotive.
A ghost in the darkness that hunted the largest animals on the planet. For millions of years, they were the undisputed masters of the South. But no empire, whether of bone or stone, lasts forever.
The very tectonic forces that had crowned the Abelisaurids now sowed the seeds of their decline. Their golden age was built on fragmentation, but this isolation became a gilded cage.
By the late Cretaceous, their dynasty was no longer a connected empire, but a series of isolated kingdoms,
Each trapped on its own continental island.
This is where the dynasty's great strength, its hyper-specialization, became its great trial. On Madagascar, Majungasaurus was locked in an evolutionary arms race with its Titanosaur prey, and with itself.
As the evidence of cannibalism attests.
In India, Rajasaurus faced a shrinking territory as the subcontinent drifted inexorably toward Asia. In South America, Carnotaurus and its kin, like Scorpiovenator, were masters of a particular niche.
The ambush brawling of large sauropods.
Their entire anatomy, from their vestigial arms to their battering ram skulls, was perfected for this single purpose. But the world does not stand still. The ecological upheaval of the late Cretaceous brought new challenges.
This was the fragmenting reign.
And a time when their dominion was tested not by a single, catastrophic event, but by 1,000 localized pressures. The most significant challenge came from a new and enigmatic dynasty of predators, the Megaraptorans. In the Abelisaurid heartland of South America, we see the rise of theropods like Megaraptor and Orcoraptor.
These were predators of a completely different design.
Where the Abelisaurids had sacrificed their arms, the Megaraptorans had weaponized them.
They were slashers, not brawlers. They were built for agility, not just brute force.
The fossil record here reads like a chronicle of a dynastic struggle.
The Abelisaurids, with their all-head, no-arm strategy, were suddenly confronted by a rival.
With an all-arm, slashing claws strategy.
These two great predatory ideas were now competing for the same resources, in the same valleys.
The Abelisaurid reign, once absolute, was now contested. Their populations, fragmented by geography, and now challenged by a new and versatile competitor,
began to feel an evolutionary pressure they had not known for millions of years.
The dynasty was no longer expanding. It was consolidating, defending, and, in some places, perhaps even beginning to recede.
The great trial had begun. The long reign of the Abelisaurid kings was entering its twilight.
This was a dynasty under siege, not just from new rivals, but from the very instability of their world.
On the southern continents, their strongholds were shrinking.
The last members of the line, figures like Quilmosaurus in South America and the tenacious Majungasaurus on Madagascar,
were specialist survivors, clinging to the niches their ancestors had conquered. They were the last monarchs of a fractured empire, still formidable. But their dominion was a shadow of its golden age.
But this dynastic struggle would never find its natural conclusion. The dynasty was not destined to be overthrown by a rival.
Its end would come from the sky. "66 million years ago, a cataclysm from beyond the world struck,
unleashing a global winter that shattered every ecosystem.
The Titanosaurs they hunted vanished, and the environment that had sustained their specialized brawling strategy collapsed.
The last of the Abelisaurid kings fell, their bizarre horns and useless arms disappearing into the darkness of extinction.
Alongside the tyrants of the north.
Their legacy, written in stone, is one of the most audacious experiments in predatory evolution.
The chronicle of the Abelisaurids is a stark reminder that dominance is never permanent. Their story, etched into the rock of lost continents, speaks to the profound and cyclical nature of life on Earth.
Empires of flesh and bone rise. They reign with absolute power.
And then they vanish, leaving only echoes and lessons for those who come after.